Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. What is the timeline of financial freedom? Those first 10 years. I talk often about reaching financial freedom, making work completely optional, that the average person can do it in less than 10 years, even if you're not starting from the best position. I've gone over the chronology of how I grew my portfolio a few times, but I've never really broken down the numbers to say, at this point in time, like in my BiggerPockets episode, I kind of went over, here's about the point where the income snowball kicked in. Here's about the point where I could save my W-2 income. Several people have asked, what was it actually like? Because the first 5 years suck. Everything seems to take forever, takes very long. It feels like nothing's happening. It was 2 years before I bought a rental and then 2 years before I bought another. So in 4 years, I did two things. That feels like it takes forever. So the purpose of this video is I want to do a memory recall, which I don't have a great memory, of what was the cash flow. And then on another day, I will make a video where I literally go and I look up W-2s, pay stubs, bank statements, tax forms, and actually see what was the actual cash flow on these compared to what I remember, which is going to be what you get today. And I have taken some notes to make sure that I talk about my W-2, side hustle, rent, savings rate for each year, but I haven't gone and looked up the actual, this is what my W-2 pay stub said, or this is what my tax return said. And on tax return, I'll have to take out depreciation because even when you make a profit, you don't make a profit when it comes to paying taxes, which is one of the beautiful things about real estate. The Cliff Notes version of the starting before year one, that very first year when I decided, okay, real estate's the thing for me. I was 40. I had made it to 40 without ever having $1,000 in the bank. So I was really starting from pretty much zero. Had gone through a divorce, was a single parent with 3 kids. I found out about a little over $300,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed until the divorce. Negotiated with lenders, which I didn't know was possible because they were concerned I was going to file bankruptcy. And at that time, I wasn't sure if I was going to go back into law enforcement, and bankruptcy is a deal breaker. But the threat of bankruptcy made the lenders or the debtors negotiate with me to where they would take 20 or 25% of what was owed. So it ended up being about $89,000 that I had to pay back. So being laid off from a police department after the 2008 housing crash, I started work at a truck driving school. I went to a trucking company first and was making like $115,000 a year, but they went on strike. So then I found myself working at a CDL school, commercial driver school in Washington, making $17 an hour. It's a big difference from $115,000 a year. So a lot of bad debt, $17 an hour, 3 kids, not in a good position. Bad debt to income ratio, a couple of other things going on there. So here's what the first year looks like. First year of cash flow, because that's what this video is. This is the cash flow decade of going from that position to a position now where I have 16 rentals, a little over $17,000 a month in pure cash flow, about $203,000 a year, retired, no longer work at W-2, have no bad debt, no balance on a credit card, no car loans, nothing like that. I have $1.8 million in good debt, which was a lot more, but we'll start with 1.8. That's good. But that's where we are now. So a position I would really like to be in, didn't know I could be in, coming from a position that I didn't want to be in and didn't actually even know I was in. So first year, after talking to a lender to fix my debt to income ratio, they said, well, one of the things you could do is if you had rental income on your tax returns, then your debt to income ratio doesn't really matter. So I moved into an apartment and rented out the house. That first year, $17 an hour, I had a side hustle of playing World of Warcraft and selling things online. I made somewhere between $200 and $600 a month on average. So the average we're going to say is $300 a month. So I was making $300 a month on my side hustle, $17 an hour at my job, raising 3 kids. It's good to look back and think, that's not a great position to be in. I think the only thing I was missing was a real big health concern. So I worked a lot of overtime. I would work at least 5 hours of overtime a week, if not 15 or 20. I was hovering between 50 to 60 hours a week at work, and then had the side hustle at home. So with I rented out the house, moved into the apartment. The apartment was like $1,500 a month. My income was $17 an hour with a bunch of overtime, which was somewhere around $3,400 a month coming in, like 29 off of the base of 40 hours a week plus overtime. So I was making like $35,000 a year, maybe a little more with as much overtime, plus the side hustle. which is income that gets taxed. But the side hustle was there, so the average would be 300. I was able to save with the side hustle and the overtime and a very frugal life. Now, the very important thing to take away from this is financial freedom for me is not about frugality. I would definitely not be doing it if I had to be frugal now. I was frugal for a few years, but not now. With the 300 from the side hustle and the overtime, I was able to save around $700 a month, plus the side hustle would be $1,000 a month. Now, there was more overtime coming in. I probably could have saved more, but I was putting some of my earned income towards any bad debt that was either an adjustable rate or above 6%. Any of the debt that I didn't create, didn't know about, but when we got divorced, she filed for bankruptcy. So our debt became my debt, and I was going to take care of it without having to file bankruptcy because it's an option. And if you do it, there's nothing wrong with it. But I was thinking maybe I'd work in law enforcement again someday. So $1,000 a month. So the first year I was able to save $12,000, but I rented out the house. And I made every mistake that you can make. I didn't educate myself. I rented to a friend without a lease. I didn't track the rents. I didn't track the expenses. I set the rent at the mortgage, so I was losing money because I wasn't setting aside for CapEx, repairs, vacancy, or anything. And so that first year, I lost about $6,000. So my saving at the end of first year, from never having $1,000 in the bank to the end of first year, was I had about $6,000. I call that a win. The rental was a loss. I wanted to quit. But I was underwater on the house. Couldn't even give it away. Subject to wasn't an option. So first year rental, bad. Work, side hustle, frugality, good. Saved about $6,000 after the loss on the rental. Year 2 at the truck driving school, I find out I'm actually pretty decent at teaching people, breaking things down in with mnemonic tricks to make things memorable. And I got a raise up to $19 an hour. So yay, still quite a bit less than driving a truck. I could have went and drove a truck, but I saw an opportunity with the CDL school and I liked the job. So at a $2 an hour raise, I was able to add about another $500 a month with work and overtime into the savings rate. So now instead of $1,000 a month from work and side hustle, it's $1,500 a month. That allowed me to save $18,000 or so in year 2, plus the $6,000 from year 1. So without really changing much, still working a bunch of overtime, doing my side hustle, moving from a house into an apartment. But now I got a good tenant in the house after that first year. I actually found a tenant. Wasn't making a lot. I was cash flowing about $400 a month after actually setting aside $275 a month for future CapEx repairs and maintenance. Because I started to educate myself. I found things like Zuber, who was at the time blogging, not even vlogging. He was blogging for BiggerPockets, and the idea of one rental at a time. Educated read Rich Dad Poor Dad, the book that brings most of us into this kind of financial freedom world. And so the cash flow from the house and the savings of my own, so $400 a month or so from the house, $1,500 from my overtime, my raise, and still living frugal. That was the key thing, is avoiding life creep. We didn't get a nicer car. I still had 2 or 3 older ones that I hope one of them ran well enough to get me to work. So I was saving around $1,900 a month-ish. Yeah, so $1,900 a month or so. By the end of year 2, I was able to save, and I got W-2 is 19, side hustle still there, $400 from the house, $6,000 that I had saved, plus $22,000, so it's like $1,900 a month times 12 months, so $22,000-ish, maybe a little more, plus the 6. So I had about $28,000 at the end of year 2, making $19 an hour. That's when I had 2 years worth of rental income on my tax returns. And with depreciation, it still looked like I didn't make a profit, but I had rental income. So I was able to buy a duplex. At the end of year 2, I bought a duplex, around $300,000. So all my first 3 duplexes were around $300,000. One was like $290,000, one was like $310,000. So it's kind of the average, around $300,000. First one, I put 5% down. So that was $15,000 plus about $5,000 in closing costs. Took $20,000 away from a guy who had never had $1,000 in the bank. I just put $20,000 into something, which left me with $8,000 or $9,000 in savings. So end of year 2, I got about $8,000. And I'm house hacking a duplex, which reduced my living expenses from the apartment of about $1,500 a month down to $300 a month, adding $1,200 a month to my saving rate. So now instead of saving $1,000 with the house cash flowing $400, I'm now saving $2,200 because I added $1,200 to the savings rate. That like almost doubles the saving rate. So by the end of year 2, I think I wrote down here $3,100, $3,000 or so a month. So somebody who had never had $1,000 in their bank 2 years later, taking care of bad debt, raising 3 kids, not making a lot of money, $19 an hour, making a mistake that third year, House was cash flowing 400. I still continued to let it cash flow 400 and didn't raise the rent. At the time, I had the mistaken idea that you don't want to raise the rent on good tenants because you could lose them. I have now learned that the biggest mistake landlords make, and the reason why there are so many former landlords, is because they don't raise the rent. Raising the rent doesn't cause tenant turnover. I actually have a strategy called the binder strategy, which you can find here on my channel, where the tenants ask me to raise the rent. And then they're happy. And so in now 12 years of investing with 16 rental units now, I've had a total of 4 tenant turnovers ever, even though I raised the rent. So that's a myth if you're thinking that. If you don't want to raise the rents because you want to be a good person, then this might not be the business for you, because you will in 5 or 6 years be able to get a better return with something else. And you'll think that's too much headache to be in real estate when you could be getting what I'm going to show you at around 8 years or so, a crazy return. That's year 2. I buy the duplex. I increase the savings. I start year 3 with about $8,000 in the bank because I spent $20 on the duplex. I'm now saving. The numbers start to become unreal to me here because I was making at the time $19 an hour, $3,100 a month. So in year 3, I save over $36,000 in that year, in that 1 year, plus the $9,000 from the year before, right? So now I've got almost $40,000, maybe even a little bit more in year 3, and I don't do anything. I don't increase my spending. I don't increase the rent. I don't increase my side hustle. I didn't get a pay raise. I'd still right around 19. So year 4, I save almost again, because now the 4th year is the first year I used the binder strategy, and now my single family house cash flowing like $800 a month. My side hustle was still the same, about 300. Pay stayed about the same. So in year 3, I was able to save again about 40,000. So at the end of year 4, I have $80,000. 40,000 from year 3, 40,000 from year 4. I have 80,000. Who has $80,000, right? 4 years before, I had 1,000. I'd be lucky to think I ever had $1,000 in the bank. So now I have 80, and I buy a little bit more than that because it was 80 something. But I purchased my first duplex investment property, not a house hack. I put 25% down on about a 3. It was a little less. This is the 291. So I put like 72,000 down plus closing costs plus immediate repairs. I spent my 80 grand. I used my retirement account as a reserve to satisfy the lender's needs. So now I'm broke again, but I had $80,000. But now I have a cash flowing rental, cash flowing single family house, cash flowing from the side hustle, and I start to make decent money at the school. By year 5, I started with over 80,000. I spent down to where I had about 16. Right, the full investment into this property. I think I had a little less than that. It was like 12 or something. But now I'm saving like $4,800 a month. It was almost $5,000 a month I was able to put into the savings account for the next thing. So that means in the next year, I saved just under 60,000 in 1 year. Year 5, I saved 60 grand plus the 10 to 15 I think I had before that. So now I have like $70,000 in a year, making $19 an hour. Right about this time, the next year I started to make more at the school, but this is the last year, 5, $19 an hour. Might have been 20. Yeah, wasn't quite 21 yet, but year 5, that's what I'm making. So around $40,000 a year, saving $40,000 a year. So that's crazy. Year and a half later, so now we're at the 5.5 year mark. The cash flow adds up to the point where I have about $90,000 again. And I bought my second investment duplex. So now I have a single family house cash flowing. I'm house hacking. I have a duplex cash flowing about $400 a unit. So it was about $800 aside, which is not the 1% rule. None of my deals have met the 1% rule. If I paid around $300,000, I would need to make $3,000 a month in rents. I wasn't making that much. I was only profiting about $800 after principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, setting aside for repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. There was about $400 per unit in profit, which was a little better than a 10% return. It was like a 12% return on that first investment duplex. Not the 1% rule, but a 12% return. Totally would do it all again. So at 5.5 years, I now have 2 cash flowing duplexes and a single family house. And at that point in time, lenders were limiting you to 4 mortgages. So instead of hunting for the next property, well, I'm able to save about $50,000 a year now, like 52 if I really did the math, without changing anything. No more overtime, no big pay increase, not changing careers, not going back to driving and doubling my income. I'm saving half of $100,000, right? It's crazy numbers. So I focus and I pay off what's left on a single family house because lenders were letting you keep 4 mortgages. So 2015, 16-ish timeframe. So I pay off the house, and now the house is cash flowing more. It was the worst use of my capital. I would have gotten a better return had I purchased another duplex. But 4 loans, and I didn't know about DSCR loans, asset-based seller financing. I wasn't educated. Between year 6 and 7, I pay off the house. It takes about a year and a half. I owed $131,000, so it took almost 2 years, year and a half or so, because I'm saving $50,000 a year. That $50,000 went straight into the house to increase it. Year 8, with the paid off house, with the rent increase, because I've used the binder strategy on all of the tenants now, I'm getting more than $800 per unit, not per duplex now. It's over doubled the rents because time in the market is what really works for us. Owning a rental for 2 or 3 years is huge. It's a huge difference compared to that first year. I'm now saving 100% of what I make from work off of just 7 rental units, the house and 3 duplexes. I'm house hacking 1. But that money coming in from the rents is more than it costs me to live. The first 5 years feel like they take forever. And I get it. It's stressful. And it seems like, I moved into an apartment and rented out my house, and I lost $6,000 on my rental. This is really hard to do the first year. So many people are like, if I don't do 30 rentals in my first year, I'm a failure. And I'm like, if I just had made a penny instead of losing 6, I'd have been more successful. And then at this point, here's where the biggest change is and where the income snowball really kicked in, where cash flow started to become stupid to me. My second house hack. I moved from my duplex. I paid off the single family house, saved for about another year. So this is year 10. This is right around year 10, end of year 9. So house is paid off around year 8, saved for the next year and a half, a little over $50,000 a year that I'm saving, easily saving without having to be frugal, and just like the money just piles up in a year. It's making more than that. With the house paid off, there was about another, I want to say 10,000 on top of that coming in from just that one rental in extra cash flow. So while it wasn't the worst use of my capital, I would have made more money buying a duplex. It didn't suck that I was making more money on that single family house. Still doesn't. Then now there's a Section 8 tenant in there at like $2,200 a month. It's that one place, and it's paid off. So it's cash flowing like $1,800 a month, $200 for taxes and insurance, and then $200 for repairs, maintenance, of vacancy. So that's okay. Okay with that. That one now beats the 1% rule. So I buy my fourplex. I move into the fourplex at the very beginning of 2020, January 6th, close on my duplex or my fourplex. I move in. It's cash flowing $1,700 a month with me living there. And now I get to rent out the unit in the duplex I was living in. So that was $800 at the point in cash flow. Now it's almost $2,000. In 2 years, it's almost $2,000 a month in cash flow on that one duplex. I'm financially free at that point. And in 2020, I purchased a triplex. This is when we had the CARES Act, and you could empty out your retirement accounts if you were impacted by things going on in 2020 without paying a 10% penalty. So I took the money out of the retirement account to help me live my life, which was buying a triplex. And I happily paid the taxes on the retirement account money because at this point I had my systems in place. I knew what I was doing. I had a reasonable confidence in my ability to get the return I wanted. And in 2021, I added another duplex. So the cash flow after the first 8 years, I could kind of incrementally see it. The next 4 years, God, I can't even get my head wrapped around the amount of money that's coming in that I don't have to get up and go to work for or sell my life 1 hour at a time. That was a breakdown of what does it take to get cash flow in 10 years? What did it look like per unit? What did it look like to save the money? And I will probably go back and get the detailed information and say, this was the actual cash flow. This was the rent. This was the payment. But you get the idea. Your first 5 years are going to feel like they take forever. But does the last couple of years sound like they're worth it? All of this was done, not selling anything to 1031, no burr, no flipping to get capital, not making a lot of money in the beginning. I made pretty good money the last couple of years at the school. I was demoted all the way down to president of the company and started making good money. $19 an hour was good money for what I was doing, but it became more later. No home equity line of credit, no cash out refinance. I didn't do anything with the capital. I left. I want to buy properties with a down payment, move the money from the bank into the property, and then leave it there. My goal was financial freedom, not a huge portfolio. If your goal is a bigger portfolio, and you recycle capital instead of cash flow, you'll have a lot more units than me. And at 20 or 30 years, you'll have extremely more cash flow than, that's good grammar. You'll have a lot more cash flow than I do. But those first 10 years, it's going to be a lot less. That's what I didn't want to do. So you have to know what your goals are to figure out if you want to recycle capital or recycle cash flow. Two different strategies.
I hope this video at least made you think. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk. And YouTube thinks this video right here is going to be the one that helps you find financial freedom.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.